Well, good morning and welcome to day 4 of 9 weeks to a novel. Sorry, I am a couple minutes late here. It is allergy season, and as we all know, that's a very fun time, right? So today, it's very exciting. We are going to talk about high concept ideas, world building, and using magical objects. So hopefully we can get started here without any further delay, right? All right, so today we're going to talk about high concept. So your first question, if you've never heard of it, is what is a high concept novel? Or what is a high concept story, right? The answer is that it is something that is unique and original. And in the way that it is unique and original, it brings two things together which generally don't mix. So, for example, Star Wars is a mixture of science fiction and Western. And you can really see that with how, it starts in a Western kind of sandy place. And the way that Han handles his blasters is very much like an old style Western shootout, right? So what you're trying to do with high concept stories is bring together two things which have never been seen together before. So when you're trying to make a high concept story, you are trying to, keep reaching for something, for new ideas that haven't been done before. And honestly, not enough authors do this. And I didn't do this enough when I first started, right? The first few ideas that you usually come up with for a story as an author are not the best. They're not the ones that you should actually go with. Most people say, you want to take your first ideas and then you probably want to write down like 7. And then after your 7th one, you kind of take that one and then start making it high concept and building the world and stuff. Because the first things that we think of are probably the closest to what we've seen before, or they're the closest to normal life. They're not very good for high concept and for drawing people in as a new amazing idea. So I'll give you a couple of examples here. Jurassic Park. It's a billionaire who brings dinosaurs back for his theme park. So it has amazing characters, right? We've got a billionaire, we've got his own theme park as the setting, and then we also have the dinosaurs, right? So between the billionaire and the dinosaurs, and then, the kind of cool science behind it, we have really a great world, a great high concept story and a high concept world, right? We have things that don't normally go together. Same thing with Terminator. So robots come back in time to change the future. We have really amazing characters there. And in the later movies, you start to see some hints of setting, like in Terminator Salvation or whatever. We kind of go to the future and we see some stuff there. In that case, they're capitalizing on both the characters and the setting to make it high concept, right? So that's another thing that you can do if you have a series, right? You start out with these high concept characters with very unique backgrounds, but you don't show it. And then, book 4, book 5, book 8, all of a sudden we go to those places and we start to see it. Another one is Pleasantville, where two kids from the 1990s get sucked into a 1950s sitcom. The very cool thing about it is that the world is actually black and white. And they do some very amazing things with color in that story that, illustrates that it's high concept and shows you that the setting also, the setting is high concept. Sorry. The characters are normal, but because the setting is so amazing, it makes the story work. And it's very similar with the Truman Show, right? So he's just a normal guy. But when he realizes his life is a reality show inside of a little bubble, the setting makes the world high concept. It makes the story high concept, right? All right, so you can do it two ways: characters or setting or both. All right. So, one great high concept idea is having a fish out of water with high stakes. So, a fish out of water is a character who doesn't know anything about that world, or they are, again, the most unlikely person to be the hero. All right. So, for example, of course, Harry Potter. A boy goes to magic school. So, he's an orphan boy who doesn't know about magic, and he goes to magic school. He's a fish out of water. And then we have the high stakes. So one of the teachers is helping to resurrect the dark, most powerful wizard ever who killed his parents 13 years ago. The combination of fish out of water and high stakes makes this story work. A second one, an astronaut stranded on Mars has to stay alive until his rescue, right? So the astronaut is actually the botanist. He's not the captain. He's not the engineer. He's the farmer. So basically, he is probably the most fish out of water guy. Maybe aside from the teacher who was going up in the Challenger. Like basically, he's the most high concept character that you can get, or sorry, fish out of water character that you can get for your high concept story. And then high stakes. He becomes stranded on Mars and he has to stay alive. So the stakes are very high, right? If he doesn't stay alive, that's it. We don't have a novel. All right, another one. NASA has to find a way to stop an asteroid from hitting Earth. So they recruit a team of these misfit, deep core oil drillers, right? Bruce Willis, to go and fly up and save the Earth. So, obviously it's a fish out of water because these guys have never been in space. And that gives them some, great scenes of training and whatever. And then having high stakes, they have to save the Earth, right? So you can see how having this fish out of water combined with high stakes makes a really amazing high concept story. All right. So for your first assignment today, what we're going to do is we're going to think about the characters that you have right now. And I want you to think about how to make them extra. So it would be more unique, more interesting, more exciting, from a unique place. Some of the most inspirational stories, I'm thinking of Florida. He's, from a ghetto. Now he's like a massive rap pop star. You want to have the most interesting, unique background that you can have for your characters so that, as their story comes out, if you write a sequel or whatever, as their story comes out, it really makes it interesting for the reader and it draws them in, right? The next thing is how do you make your setting extra? And we're going to go into setting with world building. But if you can get a couple of preliminary ideas in this first section, probably you probably won't do the Google Doc until after we're done. But in this, you want to try to think about what can you do with your setting that would make it a vicarious experience that readers aren't going to get when they are just, in real life. Obviously characters are never going to experience, or people are never going to experience space or Mars or a magic school or, Lord of the Rings or even a jungle. So you want to make the setting amazing and something that they would never experience without your novel, right? And then the next one is how can you make your story extra? How can you raise the stakes? So it would be high stakes for your characters, high stakes for the world. And in the back of your mind, I want you to think that you want something that will universally appeal to most readers, right? So, that's one reason why epic quests used to be, like the Odyssey and the Iliad. Most people want to imagine themselves going on an amazing quest. So that's one reason why epic fantasies appeal. They have this universal appeal of characters going and doing something amazing and living through amazing experiences, right? All right, so we have our characters, our setting, and our story that we can try to work with high concept. And then we can also, work with cross genres like the science fiction and Western. which we'll talk more about tomorrow in plotting. All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about is world building, right? So world building is creating the setting for your story. It can also be a way to make your story high concept. World building is necessary for stories in every genre. I know that most of the examples I've given so far have been science fiction and fantasy, right? But that is not the case. And if you are writing an urban fiction or you're writing a romance, you still need to look at how you're creating your world. And I hope that that becomes clear to you in this section right now. I want you to think about how these stories are high concept and how they use world building tools, all right? So the mysteries. My example is Murder on the Orient Express. If you close your eyes, you can see that train, right? You can see the visuals of the mountains and the snow and the ice, and then this beautiful luxury train going through it. The world building of that story was really just as important as the actual mystery, because it gives the readers the feeling and it draws them into something that they would have never experienced, right? Most of us aren't going to go on the Orient Express, unfortunately. It's on the bucket list, right? But you want to give the readers something that they would never have the chance to do in real life, right? I just saw the Glass Onion movie. That was fantastic. It's this, beautiful glass onion house that basically, is on an island, very very luxurious, very elitist, and it's something that most of us are never going to experience. So again, the setting really works into the story and it makes it special, right? All right, my next category, action. So when I say these titles, think in your mind, if you've seen these movies, get an image of what that world looks like, right? Die Hard, we have this building, right? Closed spaces, snakes on a plane, we have a plane. Kill Bill, Top Gun Maverick, we have, our very certain settings here. And those settings allow the reader, again, to experience things that they may never go on. I think it's only like 33% of people ever go on a plane. So you're giving a very specific example. And, I don't know how many people become a fighter pilot, but it's a lot fewer than that. So you're letting them experience something that they couldn't get without this novel. Adventure, Indiana Jones, Gladiator, Last of the Mohicans. It becomes very obvious that these worlds are things that we could never experience in real life. Who's actually going to go to an ancient tomb or ancient Rome or, the turn of the century, or 2 centuries ago, when the Last of the Mohicans was, with the, wild jungles of America, when the settlers were first here. So, again, these worlds prepare you for the type of story that you're going to get. Next one, romance. Titanic. The amazing ship coming to America. This was a great high concept idea of having a really rich guy come and work at McDougal's, right? It's a fantastic, it's fantastic. And they even play on it, with the little apartment where they put in the jacuzzi and make it amazing, right? It's a fantastic bridging of two worlds. And that is very, very high concept, right? Pretty Woman, bridging the businessman and then the, prostitutes out on the street. And then The Lost City, where we're bridging the romance novelist who has to actually go to the jungle, which is very much like Romancing the Stone, right? All right, so science fiction. Some of my favorites are Moon, Ready Player One, Dune, The Matrix, and Alien, right? And Alien was the example of blending science fiction and horror, right? So we're kind of crossing our genres and we're giving elements from each one. For fantasy, we have worlds like Avatar, Lord of the Rings, Chronicles of Narnia, and all of the Avengers movies. When you look at it too, each Avenger movie has its own setting, which becomes very interesting. And the last couple were very interesting because they're trying to blend these settings together, right? And some of them were done more successfully than others, but sometimes it feels very off to have, let's say, the Guardians of the Galaxy, who are these comedic characters, and you're used to a kind of fun setting in this very serious world, right? With these high stakes and consequences that aren't so funny. And I think that really illustrates the power of world building. It's really not just about the characters. Taking the characters from one world and putting them in another, it doesn't always work, right? So when you really need to think of your setting in your story as your world that your characters belong in, right? And your characters really only belong in your world. Okay, for YA, we have The Maze Runner, The Hunger Games, Twilight, The Princess Diaries. Again, high concept, fish out of water, amazing settings, right? I mean, Twilight, I think the whole screen was gray for most of the time, except for when she was in Arizona in the first 2 minutes, right? So you want to have a setting where when people close their eyes, they can be right there. If I say Hunger Games, you can be right there inside the dome, right? If I say Princess Diaries, you can be right there inside the palace. So you want to give readers an experience that when they think of your book, they're thinking of the setting. They're like one of the characters immersed in that world. Horror. Frankenstein, Something Wicked This Way Comes, probably why most of us are afraid of clowns, right? The Shining. I mean, you can close your eyes and just imagine the building or imagine the setting, the circus. You can imagine, or I think it was a carnival. You can imagine these settings, just basically when I snap my fingers. And then comedy. We even use it in this. It's really interesting. So 50 First Dates, The Truman Show, Chips. And it was interesting. When I was looking up the best comedies, they were even saying Jumanji and Thor Ragnarok. So, you could think about how each of these comedies has their own world. And really, some people are thinking of Thor as a comedy rather than as a fantasy. So I think that's very interesting. Now, we can see the world building elements from these on good movie posters. Sometimes you'll have a great movie poster and you don't even see any characters on it, right? So what we want to think about is if we needed to make a movie poster for your novel, what world building elements would be on it? So, for Jurassic Park, all we need is a jungle and a Jeep, right? That's all we need. We know what movie it is. It's automatic. And that's just from the world building. No characters needed, right? If we think about Romancing the Stone, all we need is maybe a jungle and the heart sitting there. Or the Corazon. I can't remember the shape, but the El Corazon, right? Stone sitting there. So for all of these, you could have just the world building elements on a poster, and we would know exactly what it is. And that's what you're looking for in your novel. What are those couple of elements on a poster where people would immediately just click into, this is my novel, right? Maze Runner, it's the maze. All right. So the world building creates the setting and the tone and the feeling of the world. It gives the reader a vicarious experience they can't have in real life. But that being said, the most elegant stories really have only 3 main elements of the world. And they use these 3 elements to drive the story. So I'll give you a couple of examples. The first one is Dune. In Dune, we have sand, worms, and spice. And everything in that novel is driven by those three things, right? Everything is either a consequence of them or how people deal with them. But those three things build that world and they drive that story from start to finish, literally. The next one is Star Wars. We have spaceships, lightsabers, and the Force. And when you look at every plot point in that series, and when you close your eyes and just think of Star Wars, these are the things that are going to come to your mind, right? You've got Yoda, you've got a lightsaber, and you've got those large spaceships coming in over the top of you, right? Or you're in one. Lord of the Rings, we have the three rings, the races, and magic. With Mortal Engines, I wanted to point this out because I saw that on a plane. It wasn't something I'd gone to see specifically, but I saw it on a plane and I was absolutely fascinated by how they used, the author used this engine as one element to drive this story from start to finish. I mean, everything was about the engine. And it was just fantastic. So you can have these amazing, books or amazing ideas where they can use one element just to drive the story. I was thinking of Back to the Future. If you just see the car, that's enough to make you think. And it really does drive the story. Everything is about the time travel using the car, right? So your exercise that I would like you to do is to find main world elements that drive the story from your favorite book or movie, maybe do 2 or 3, and put them in the comments here, right? Because it will be good to have comments from other people who are not just science fiction fantasy fans, right? I try to branch out as much as I can, but there are, I'm sure if you think about like Friends or Sex and the City, 2 shows I've never seen, you could probably find those world building elements. I mean, Friends would probably be like the apartment is the setting, right? Even I know that, and I haven't watched the show. So, so that shows you like how world building is important and how it can really drive the story. All right, so the next thing for assignment 2, what you're going to do is you are going to think of the world of your story and find a way to make it unique. So it's not like any other story that you've ever read, heard, thought of, read, seen, heard about. And you can do that in many ways. So I'm going to give you some examples. Either time, so forward, backward, alternate reality, place, specific location, specific group of people. They used to use this a lot in the X-Files, right? You'd be in a cult or you'd be in a small town, or they'd have to pretend to be, somebody else. And I don't know, some of the most amazing X-Files things happened. I remember one time they went to the army base where Scully's brother was, I think. So they were always using these kind of like specific small locations or specific groups of people that we don't normally, get a chance to experience. And you can use specific details that are different. So one great example of this is steampunk. I think there was a movie, Wild Wild West, that used this, but it's basically where electricity was never invented. So everything in the world runs on steam power. And that allows you to have some amazing world elements, right? That you don't get in an electric society. And also changing the power structure. So our power structure in capitalism really runs on money, right? The more money you have, the more power you have. But if you change the power structure, like using the purebloods in Harry Potter, or using coins in Tomorrowland, where you have to possess the coin to get to the magic world, it changes the power structure so that only people who have this certain thing have the power. So you can really play with that in your world and make it amazing. I mean, to a lesser extent, it was the same with the magic in Harry Potter. If you could do magic, you had more power than if you were a muggle, right? So there are ways to mess around with the world to give people certain powers. I think X-Men, if you're a mutant, you have more power, uh, or or you have less power because you're treated worse. So playing with these ideas can make an amazing world for you. One note is that the special elements in your world should match your genre, but you want to make these unique to your story. So, for example, with sci fi, we have like ships, tech, and alien races. But when you think about Alien, it's very, very different than Star Wars, right? So we have the same things, but they're done completely differently. And that's what you're looking for. Or 2001, right? You want to have a world that is completely, and the great example, I guess, would be Star Wars and Star Trek. How the feel of these are very different, right? Star Wars is, I don't know, Star Trek is just so put together. Everything is perfect in the setting, right? And Star Wars just seems to be more like the Wild West, right? So, anyway, you want to make these elements the same as what your readers expect from your genre, but you want to make them unique to your story. Fantasy, same thing. Magic, wizards, dragons, if that's what they're expecting and that's what you want to use, then you want to make them different than any magic, wizards, and dragons than in any other story. And my great example for that is how different the Chronicles of Narnia is than Lord of the Rings, right? Both fantasy, both kind of epic, interesting worlds, big quests, but the worlds feel very different, right? So always keep that in mind. And if you want to know what the expectations are of your genre, I'm not really going through them either today or tomorrow when we're plotting, but I'm going to talk a lot about genre. It wouldn't be a bad idea for you to Google your genre and actually look for what do people expect, especially if this is your first novel. You may not be thinking of the tropes and the expectations that the readers have of your genre, even if you've written it for a very long time. Like when I'm saying ships, tech, and alien races, that's really, low hanging fruit. There are other expectations that people have of sci-fi that it would be good for you to know before you start really, trying to plot your story and build your world and bring everything together. All right. So, the last thing we're going to talk about today are magical objects. And you might think, why do I need a magical object? I'm writing like a romance, like the Princess Diaries, right? And the answer is that magical objects contribute to high concept stories and world building in a way that nothing else does. And they're useful for writers in all genres, okay? Magical objects have special properties and meaning to the characters, and they're usually involved in moving the plot forward. I'll give you a great example of a movie I saw not too long ago, Dumplin', where the bumblebee was really the magical object that represented the ant, right? So you want, no matter what genre you're thinking of, you want to see, can I put a magical object in? It will be something that is special only to that person. Or it has some kind of special property to where if they lose it, it's a massive loss, right? And it could be anything. In more urban settings, it could be a special necklace or bracelet or a picture or an animal. I mean, so it could be anything. But you really want to think about that before you start your story. Is there a way that I can put an object in here? If nothing else, it helps for later for your website and all these different things. Because if you can just have a certain necklace, like Arwen's necklace, the Even Star, man, you can monetize that, right? So try to think of something that you can use that then would kind of represent your book, or you could put it on the cover, you could put it on the back cover, or you can have it on your website, right? All right, I'll stop talking about money. All right, so magic object examples. The Titanic, the necklace, right? I can't even tell you how much money has been made off of reproducing that necklace. Star Wars, the lightsaber, Disneyland is making $150 every time you walk into that, right? Every time you go to build your own lightsaber, whatever, 150 per person. The Ring, the videotape, horror. Okay, so this one is less monetizable probably because we're really not going to sell like magical videotapes, and who would want it? But anyway, that's just an example of a magical object in a horror story. Romancing the Stone would be the stone. Knives Out would be the fake knife, right? And people who really get into the story, they might want to buy a fake knife, a prop knife, and just have it somewhere on a bookshelf, So my point is that this magical object can really contribute to your story. And it can also give readers something else to hold on to in their mind. When I say Titanic, you're thinking ship, and then you're thinking necklace, and you might be thinking naked picture of Rose, right? But that's like a distant third, probably, to the ship and the Titanic and the necklace. So you want to have something that when your readers close their eyes, they can imagine certain things from your story, again, like they would on a movie poster, and that will help to differentiate you from anything else in that genre. I mean, Hunger Games, it was the bow, right? I read an article that was talking about how many young girls learned to shoot with a bow and arrow. I mean, it was a phenomenon, right? So you can really make your story empowering too, if you by using some of these objects. Anyway, okay, enough about objects. Let's see. Let's talk about how they're used in the plot. So integrating magical objects as world elements in the plot can be done by thinking about how that object can advance the plot, right? So taking the bumblebee in Dumplin', she was missing her aunt, and she was going through her things, and she had given away as she was giving away things, that bee pin fell out, right? And so it was kind of like a piece of her aunt staying with her, even though she's gone. And then later in the story, she looks at it before she's about to go on the stage, and then she ends up giving it to her mother because she starts to recognize that her mother also missed her sister, and she needed that as something to hold on to. And it was kind of a recognition that Dumplin' didn't need it anymore because she'd kind of found herself, right? So we can use magical objects to kind of show this journey of people needing things. Oh, I wish I could remember. There was a wonderful story in the 80s. Michael Keaton. He was a guy who stayed home and took care of the kids, and the little boy had a whoopee. And I think at the end they burned the whoopee because the boy realized he didn't need it anymore. This kind of thing is really great to put into your plot because it drives the story and it gives the reader something or watcher something to really hold on to, right? Or to let go of. It's a representation of some part of the characters. All right, so I have this example of lightsabers. So Luke learns about the Jedi and their powers through receiving the lightsaber. It was kind of the initial thing that set him on his quest, or the initial inciting incident that indicated that now he's ready to take this quest. He fights his father with the lightsaber and loses his arm, and then finds out who his father really is. So, I mean, through his first real battle with this lightsaber, everything changes for him. And also, Ben is killed with a lightsaber, so his mentor's killed, which means that he's really on his own. And then for the series, he has to learn the way of the Jedi, and he has to be strong enough. So he basically goes through book 2 thinking that it's about, or movie 2, thinking about that it's about learning to use the lightsaber. Right? So that is symbolizing his becoming a man. But then at the end, he has to be strong enough to throw that lightsaber away and say, no, I'm going to use my heart and I'm going to have empathy, right? And so when he shows compassion in the final scene, you recognize that the lightsaber was just a tool, but his character growth was actually outside of that. And I think Dumplin did that too. It's very interesting how people use magical objects in every genre. And the more that you start looking for them, the more that you will see them in these amazing stories, especially in movies, you'll see it. All right, so magical objects are used to build character, as I just said. You can integrate them into character arcs. I have Luke again, but the same thing is with Harry in Harry Potter. He gets the wand in book one, he learns to use it, and he grows, and it is the key to defeating Voldemort in the end, even though, again, it's really external. It's a property of the wand and not Harry, and that will show you kind of what's missing in the story arc from Harry Potter again, that it's external and not internal to him, how he wins in the end. And Indiana Jones is great because, especially the Holy Grail, that storyline about getting the Grail and then having to use it to heal his father, and then having to let it go in the end, even though it was like the biggest thing he searched for all of his life, right? But in the end, he had to let it go in order to live. So he realizes that there's something more important than the Grail and immortality. Okay, so for assignment 3, you are going to think of a magical object that you can use to help your story along. And it could be something that is just special to the character, like a photo, a pair of shoes. It could also be something with real magical properties. It could be something that is special to a society, like stealing a statue or stealing, something. I'm thinking of Gru stealing the moon, right? It could be something really amazing. So you want to, anyway, in this assignment, you want to think of how can I incorporate a magical object into my plot, and I want you, even if you think that this is hokey or that you don't want to do it yet, I want you to think about it for practice, okay? Because your first book may not be the book where you incorporate all of these amazing things. But there's never anything wrong with trying to use your imagination to do these exercises, okay? And the more that you do them, maybe in your 10th book, you're like, oh my God, the thing that was missing was the magical object. Or, oh my gosh, my world isn't high concept enough, So you want to practice doing all of these things. And then tomorrow, when we start looking at the plot, you will have a lot of tools to draw from. Okay? All right. So the QR code is here, and the worksheet is available at our Google Docs, 9 weeks, day 4. And we are going to go ahead and take a 5-minute break so I can get some water. Then we will come back for our first sprint. And if you learned something amazing today, please put it in the comments. And you're always welcome to like and subscribe if you want more. I'm going to be here every day at the same time, 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Central, and 8 a.m. Pacific. So, all right, let's take a break and then we will be back. Okay, and we are back for our sprint, our first sprint of the day. Before we sprint, I wanted to recommend a book to you that I have used in writing my setting. It's called Writing Active Setting. And since I'm really talking in this class about world building and not setting, I wanted to mention this as a nice kind of add on. And the other thing that she talks about in here is hooks. So I'll give you a couple of topics. She does using setting to reveal character, using setting to show emotion, and using setting to create complication. And that is something that you can do, if you already have done these exercises before, whatever, this is something that's a great add on. And, none of these people are paying me to plug their books. I'm obviously too small of a channel for that. But this is something that I really use. So any of the books I mentioned in here are ones that I'm using in my writing that I think you could really benefit from. And I'll leave a link in the description to it if you want to check it out. All right, so we're at our first sprint for 40 minutes. And we have our page one, our high concept, world building, and magical objects. Part one is high concept. If it takes you the full 40 minutes to do this, that would be absolutely fantastic. This is where you really want to engage your imagination and engage your brain for something outside of your story. All right. So try to think about the characters that you have, make their backgrounds amazing, make who they are amazing, make them the most unlikely person. Think of your setting, think of your world building, and try to, get a couple of things that you can use that you've like never seen anybody do before, right? This is where it becomes hard to be an author. And where it becomes difficult to create new worlds. And the closer that your world is to reality, let's say like a Friends or a Sex in the City, the more difficult it is, and the more that you really have to think about, wow, how can I differentiate myself from everyone else who's doing the same genre? So I really encourage you to think deeply about these three questions, all right? All right, so let's start, and I will see you back in 40 minutes. Okay, so how did you do with your high concept world, huh? I'm very interested to hear what you did. Maybe let me know in the comments, right? I know sometimes you're afraid someone else is going to steal your idea or something like that, but believe it or not, it happens less often than you think, especially for things like high concept worlds or magical objects. I mean, we can do the same things over and over again, but in completely different ways. I can't tell you how many times the story's had a magical necklace in it, or how many times they've had a magical stone. Um, but the stone in Romancing the Stone is completely different than the one in Infinity War. So it really just depends on how your story uses those things, right? So it's okay to put in comments like different ideas that you have or different questions that you have, because remember, I'm here to answer, right? Um, all right, so we are going to take our break now. And of course, it is drink water and dance to a song time. So I will see you back here in 5 minutes. And yep, you have time to go even get a coffee or get some get some tea. It's pretty cold outside here, so tea sounds really good right now. I'll see you in 5 minutes. Hey, okay, and we're back. So, what song did you dance to? Maybe let us all know in the comments. Um, let's see. We are now on to our second sprint, and that sprint would be world building, right? So, you're going to take your story world and add at least 5 unique elements to it, but you have 3 that you really want to focus on to drive the story. Okay? So remember that you want the reader to associate that world with only you. And on this worksheet, I put our examples again, and then I gave you an example of a hospital that then I would try to make into something specific for my world. Okay, so you have the example there, and we are going to do our 20 minutes. Time to turn your brain on, and I will see you back shortly. Okay, and we are back. How did your world building go? I'm so interested to see what you did with your world and kind of combining it with your characters, thinking about that. Um, anyway, so we are going to take a 5-minute break. The recommended exercise this time is 10 push ups and 10 crunches. So we kind of get down on the floor and drink water, and then we will be back in 5 minutes for our next sprint. Okay, how did you do? After my push ups and crunches, I actually did a couple of minutes on the trampoline and it made me feel a lot more alive. So if you have other things in your house, try to work those in. It makes our sprints that much easier because our mind is going, right? All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is look at our magical objects worksheet, right? So you're going to try to create a magical object that you can use throughout your story along with the plot. What can it represent? How can you build it into a character arc? And again, even if you're not going to use it in the final novel, try to do it just for practice, right? And you'd be surprised how easy and how it might work itself into your storyline as you write. All right? All right, so I will see you again in 20 minutes. Here we go. And we are back for our next break. This will be our last break before our last sprint. So today, drink water, and I guess I have 2 minutes of lower body stretching. One more time. That sounds great. Don't forget your psoas muscles, right? All right, so here we go. Last chance for coffee. I'll see you back in 5 minutes. Okay, here we are, and we've made it to our last sprint of the day. Um, for this sprint, I encourage you to go back and look at your character arcs from yesterday and see if you can put some of the world building or get an idea of how your magical object will fit into one or more of your character arcs, right? It's always good to try to draw these things together. Or to get an idea of how they're going to work together before we start writing the plot, right? So what you're trying to do is look back over what we did, in the first 2 days, plus what we're doing now, and kind of get an idea of how these are going to work together. If you haven't finished the first two worksheets or the worksheet from today, then don't worry about it, right? Just continue going with where your imagination is taking you. But if you have finished, it's always good to go back now and take a look at these things along with your characters to get an idea of how it's going to work together, right? All right, so we have our final 20 minutes starting now. And then I'll see you back really quickly at the end, all right? Have fun. All right. I guess my timer ran out at the last minute there. So how did you do? Um, were you able to kind of think of some ways that you can incorporate this world building and magical concepts and into your novel and make your novel more high concept? That is the goal. And tomorrow we will be back to work on our plot, our first day of actual plotting, right? So it's going to be really exciting. I hope you join me live. And remember that you are the magic, right? All right. Have a great night or great day wherever you may be. And I'll see you tomorrow.